to my channel. In today's video, I'll be showing you how to draft this double-breasted jacket pattern from a basic bodice block. It is very easy. All you need to do is pay attention, get your paper and pen, and you are good to go. So if you're new to my channel, you're welcome. Kindly click the subscribe button and click the bell so that you get updated when the sewing tutorial for this blazer jacket pattern comes up. And now let's get right into the tutorial. So here are my front and back patterns that we'll need to make this sleeveless double-breasted jacket pattern. I have my front pattern and my back pattern. The reason why my pattern is looking like this is because I created the pattern to be dartless and have dart allowance. So in case I need to use the pattern to create something that doesn't need dart allowance, I'm going to use this part on the inside. If I need my dart as is with the double-breasted jacket pattern that we want to make, I'm going to use the part that has the dart allowance, okay, which is the entire whole pattern. So now we are going to start working to create a jacket pattern, and I'm going to be starting from the back. So what I'm going to do first is to transfer all these lines on my back pattern to the new pattern paper that I've placed underneath it. But I'm not going to trace the outside line. The reason why I'm not doing that is because we're going to extend our jacket length from our hip to about increase it by 2 inches. So I'm going to extend my jacket length by 2 inches. So I'm not going to sketch out this line, but I'll go ahead and sketch out the remaining lines that we have here. Okay, I'm going to trace out the center back, trace out my waist, the dart, the bust, the neckline, and the shoulder and armhole. In order to do this, you can use a pin to mark the points that you want to trace out. Okay, you can use a pin to mark the points. Do you understand? So that's what I'm going to do on my pattern paper and trace everything out, but I'm going to leave the side seam untraced because of the extension that we want to do at the bottom. So after tracing out our pattern, this is what we have. This is the original pattern that we used to trace this out. If you have seen blazer jackets, you realize that they are not so fitted on the body. So we are going to add a little bit of ease to this pattern. Okay, this pattern already has the dart allowance at the waist, but we're still going to add ease to our pattern. So we're going to add ease of 1/2 inch or 0.5 inch to the bust, to the waist, and to the hip. So I'm going to come to the bust area. From this point now, I'm going to mark 1/2 inch. Okay, so I'll mark 1/2 inch here for my ease. I'm not adding seam allowance. I'm going to add seam allowance on my fabric. I'll come right here, 1/2 inch. So in order not to confuse us, I'm not adding seam allowance. I'm coming right at the hip as well. I'll add 1/2 inch. So this 1/2 inch is just 1/4 of the entire allowance that we are adding. Okay, by the time we calculate the total ease allowance that we are adding for both back and front, it is going to come to 2 inches, and that is, definitely okay by me. So now that I'm done with this now, I'm going to extend this center back line down by 2 inches. Remember I said we are going to increase our jacket length by 2 inches. So I'm going to come to my center back, extend it by 2 inches. Come to my side seam at the hip, extend it as well by 2 inches. And you need to make sure that whatever you have marked here, okay, whatever you have marked here, for me, it is 11.5 inches. It's the same thing that I have at the bottom as well. And once that is okay, I'm going to join the bottom like this. Then I'm going to join this point now, which is our jacket length, okay, not the hip this time around. I'm going to join this point to my waist. And then I'm going to join my waist to my bust. The next thing I'm going to do is to shapen the center back of my pattern. We're going to divide this back pattern into 2. We're going to be cutting out the darts, and we're going to be cutting the center back. So in order to shapen my pattern, I'm going to come to my waist. I'm going to mark 1/2 inch inwards, connect my waist to my new jacket length, and connect my waist again to the neckline at the center back. So this is what I'm going to do now. Just like this. connecting this, I'm going to come right at my shoulder. We're going to turn this into a shoulder princess seam. Okay, so I'm going to come right at my shoulder, divide it into 2. So I have 5.25 inches here. I just fold my tape rule into 2 like this. Then I place it and mark the folded edge on my shoulder. So after marking the midpoint at my shoulder, I connected it to my dart in order for us to make this a shoulder princess seam. And I went on to curve this part because you don't want this area to be sharp. Okay, so I went on to smoothing the lines with my marker pen, as well as smoothing this area around my waist. Okay, you don't want your waist area to be sharp as well. You want that place to be curved, especially because that is your center back. The next thing I did was to come right at this point at the bottom of the jacket pattern. I marked 2 inches here and 1.5 inches here, and I went on to curve this out. Okay, I went on to curve this out because I don't want my jacket to have this sharp edge at the bottom corner of the side seam. So that's why I went ahead to do this. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to cut my pattern. So we have 2 pieces for this back pattern. So here is the first piece, which is towards the side seam, and right here is the second piece, which is towards the center back. Okay, so we're going to cut this out like this. Okay, cut the darts out like this and cut this out. So this will be our first pattern, and then I'm going to follow this line for my second pattern, follow this shoulder towards the neckline, cut this part that we have taken inside towards the waist all the way down like this. Okay, cut out our darts. So here is my pattern all cut out. Here is piece 1 and piece 2, and I wanted to mention that the neckline for my back pattern is 1 inch. Okay, I'm using 1 inch for the neckline of my back pattern. So I'll go on to indicate 0.5 inch seam allowance on all sides of my back pattern, and we're going to be cutting 2 mirror images of pattern 1 and pattern 2 for both the main fabric and the lining that we are going to use to make this double-breasted jacket. So I have done my front pattern exactly how I did for my back. I traced everything out, added 0.5 inch of ease to my bust, to my waist, and to my hip. I measured everything I had on my hip. I extended my jacket length by 2 inches, and that is what I have here. Okay, and the exact measurement I have on my hip is what I replicated here. And then I used the back pattern curve to create this curve that we can see here. All right, so I just placed it on top and I curved it out. So that is what we have for our front pattern. Now my neck depth for my front pattern is 4 inches. Okay, so let me just go ahead and quickly measure for you guys to see. So I have 4 inches for my neck depth for my front pattern. You can go on to increase it up to 4.5, okay, because that is where the notch of your jacket collar is going to be. So you have the option of increasing it, you know, up to 4.5 or up to 5 inches. You know, depends on the design that you want for your double-breasted jacket. And another thing I want to mention is that my dart is 1 inch below my bust line. Okay, so please take note of that. Now, what we want to do is to convert this into a princess seam, as well as draft out the part that is going to, you know, the double-breasted part of this jacket, as well as the collar. So I'm going to start with the princess seam, then move to the double-breasted parts before drafting the collar. All right, so in order to draft the princess seam, shoulder princess seam for this jacket pattern, what I'm going to do is to divide my shoulder into 2. So measure, I have 5.25, fold my tape rule into 2. Okay, I find the midpoint, and then I'll just come right here and mark the folded parts of my tape rule. And please, another thing I want to mention is when transferring your pattern to another piece of pattern paper, especially for your jacket, you want to leave a little bit of room here, up to 5 inches or more, okay, in order for us to draft the double-breasted part of this jacket. So it's good that I mentioned that to you guys. So after doing this now, I'm going to join this part right here to the top of my darts, okay? And after joining, I'm going to curve this part out. So that is what we have here. The next thing I'm going to do is to come at the shoulder point. I'm going to mark 1/4 inch towards the center front and 1/2 inch towards the side seam. So that is a total of 0.75 inches. And you need to make sure that that 0.75 inches that you're taking out here, you need to replace it right here. Okay, so I'm going to mark 0.75 inches right here. So did you see what I did now? So I replaced the 0.75 inches I'm going to take as that. I replaced it right here. And then what I'm going to do is to connect this point here to my bust line, where this line meets my bust line right here, and do the same thing for this part as well, where this line meets my bust line. So now that we have drawn this, I'm going to come to this dark line that is closest to the armhole. I'm going to mark a 1/4 inch upwards like this, and I'm going to connect it to the 0.75 extension that we have here. The reason why I'm doing this is so that by the time we cut our pattern and we are joining it back together, we are not shortened on this side. Okay, that is why I'm doing it like this. So now that we are finished with this part, what I'm going to do is to create our new armhole. So I'm just going to go ahead and connect it with my French curve like this. So this is our new armhole. This is how we are going to be cutting this part out. So please take note of that. Right now, we are done with our shoulder princess seam. The next thing we are going to do is to move to the double-breasted part of this pattern. So in order to get the double-breasted part of this pattern, all you need is your bust span divided by 2. Your bust span is your nipple to nipple distance, okay? So mine is 8 inches. 8 divided by 2 is 4 inches. And that is exactly what I marked for my bust span right here. Okay, I have about 4 inches. So it's that 4 inches that we want to use for the double-breasted part of our blazer jacket. So what you are going to do is from your center front line, you are going to be marking 4 inches outwards like this, okay? Do you understand? You are going to mark 4 inches outwards. So the bottom of the jacket, I mark 4 inches. The waistline, I mark 4 inches, okay? The bust line, I'm going to mark 4 inches, and my neckline, I mark 4 inches. So what I'm going to do is to join these points together, okay? Join them together. So after joining the points together, this is what I have. The next thing we are going to do is to create the lapel for this jacket. And what I'm going to do is to first of all come to my shoulder line. I'm going to extend my shoulder line upwards by 1 inch. So I'm going to come right here and just follow my shoulder line. I mark 1 inch. So now you can decide where you want your how you want your lapel to be. If you want it to be at your bust line or you want it to be at your waist. So I'm going to go for the one that will be ending at the waist. So what I'm going to do is to connect this point to this point here, okay, where we have our double-breasted jacket extension. I'm going to join it to have a straight line. So this point right here is called a breaking point, okay, because that is where your lapel will break from. And this line here is called the roll line because that is how your lapel will roll, okay? So the next thing we're going to work on now is to create our lapel. And what I'm going to do is to mark 1/3 inches from the roll line. So at this point where my roll line connects to my neckline, so I'm going to mark 1/3 inches from that point, okay? So I'll come right here and mark 1/3 inches. Then I'm going to come up by 1 inch. And I'll connect this point to this point here, okay, with a straight line. So just like this. So this should be measuring around 2 inches. I'm going to get my curved ruler and we're going to connect this to form our lapel. So I'm going to place it like this and then I'm going to connect. And now we have our lapel formed already. So what we want to do next is to work on the collar. So for the collar part, I'm going to come right at my neckline. Around the shoulder point, I'm going to mark 1/4 inch like this. Okay, so this 1/4 inch now, I will now connect it to the curve of my neckline. since we want to create the collar, I'm going to go ahead and attach another piece of paper underneath so that we can draft our collar. The next thing I'm going to do is to extend this line upwards like this. So now that we have extended the line, we are going to be marking our back neckline from the shoulder. So I'm going to get my back pattern now and measure the neckline. Okay, so if I'm measuring this, I have 3.5 inches. So what I'm going to do is to come right here and mark that 3.5 inches from the shoulder line. Okay, so I'm going to mark 3.5 inches. And we're going to go on to find the midpoint of this 3.5 inches. So I'm going to fold my tape rule into 2 and then come right here and mark 1.75 inches, because 3.5 divided by 2 is 1.75 inches. So at the point where I have my 3.5 inches marked, I'm going to come outwards by 0.25 inches. And then I'm going to connect this to the middle of the back neckline. Connect it like this. And what we are going to do is to blend this to have a smooth curve. Okay, so we want to come right here and blend our back neckline. So this is going to be our new back neckline. What I'm going to do next is to mark the width of our collar, and I'll be going with 2 1/4 inches. Okay, so I'm just going to draw a line parallel to this line that we have here, and it's going to be about 2 1/4 inches. Okay, so you want to make sure that the line is parallel to this one that we have here, in order to ensure that it is parallel to each other. So just go ahead and place your rulers like this and ensure that they look really straight across from each other. Okay, so once that is done, like I said, you need to be sure that you have 2 1/4 from this edge. Okay, so since I have 2 1/4 like this, I'll go ahead and mark this point. Now, if it's not parallel to each other, you are going to have a wrong measurement. If I should go ahead and place my tape rule like this, okay, you see that I have a little more than 2 1/4. If I should go down like this, I'm going to have less. So that is why I said you need to ensure that your rulers are parallel to each other, and then ensure that you have 2 1/4 between both of them. And I'm going to go on to join the points like this. Okay, and what I'm going to do next is to determine the notched part of this, our collar. Okay, so I'm going to come right back here. I'm going to mark 1 inch upwards from the edge of our lapel. Okay, so I'm going to come right here and mark 1 inch upwards like this, and connect this to this point where the center front line meets the edge of my lapel. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and draw a straight line at that point like this. So now you can decide how you want your lapel to be. That depends on you, whichever design that you want. That is, up to you. So what I'm going to do at this point now is to come right here and mark 1 1/4 inch from the center front extension point. Okay, where this line meets, I'm going to mark 1 1/4 like this, and then I'm going to connect this point here to this point here with a slight curve. Okay, so this part right here is our main collar, here is our lapel, okay, and here is the notched part. So what I'm going to do is place my pattern paper underneath like this and trace out my collar. So after tracing this out, I'll bring out the paper from underneath, and then I'm going to go on to use my marker to flesh out the lines that we have just traced out. So here is my collar all traced out. So I marked the part that is going to sit on my neckline, so we know which parts that we are going to sew onto the neckline. And right here is the notch point. Okay, so right here is the notch point. So you need to notch on fabric the part that is your notch point, and this part right here that is going to match with your shoulder point. So you need to notch those two places. So when you are sewing, it is going to be very, very easy for you to sew. And we're going to be adding half an inch seam allowance all around this collar pattern. So after adding my seam allowances to the collar, this is what I have. I did not add seam allowance here because this is the center back. This is the part that would, align with the center back of your bodice. So don't add seam allowance there, except you want to add seam allowance and, join it back. This is the part that will sit on the back neckline. I've marked my shoulder point here. This is the part that will sit on the front neckline. The next thing we're going to do is to cut out our block, okay, to cut out our jacket panels. And because we are dividing this into two, I've gone ahead to label this panel 1 and panel 2 before the dart and after the dart. So I'm going to cut our panel 1 like this, following the dart, and come right back to the side seam and armhole. Then for panel 2, I will cut out my collar. I'll cut it out, cut out this part. So I'm going to follow it like this. Okay, cut out my collar, come right here, cut out my lapel, and cut it right back down. So after cutting out our front pattern, this is what it looks like. By the time we fold our lapel backwards, this is how it is going to be. And if I should get my collar now and place it like this, okay, so our collar too will sort of, fold at some point. So here is the break point of the collar. Okay, so by the time it folds like this, okay, there's going to be sort of like a little space right here. So our pattern is going to have half an inch seam allowance all around. All around, everywhere is going to have half an inch seam allowance. So it is when I'm cutting this out on fabric that I'm going to be adding my seam allowances all around. So we are done with our pattern for this jacket, both front and back. So here is the back pattern. I also said we are going to be adding 0.5 inch for seam allowance all around our pattern. So for your collar, you are going to cut 2 pieces of this, and this will be cut on fold. Okay, this side will be cut on fold, and this one you are going to cut 2 pieces as well, mirror images of each other, as well as for your other remaining front and back pattern. So we are going to have 2 pieces each of these for both your main fabric and your lining fabric. In my next tutorial, I'm going to show us the sewing process for this jacket. So please remember to subscribe, turn on the bell so you get updates when that video comes up. And thank you for watching this tutorial. I'm going to see you in my next video. Bye.